Yeah. I love my HBCU. And boy, I love it, love it. I love it, love it. I love my HBCU. And man, I hope my team they won. Yeah. I hope my team they won. Yeah. Man, I hope my team they won. I hope my team they won. Yeah. I tune into the HBCU Sports Lab to see if my team won or lost. If they lost, I'm quiet as a mouse. But if they won, keep tab. I'ma do the dab, yeah. Dr. Cavil, he know what he be talking about. Mike and Charles, they know what they be talking about. They compress the analytic data with the hip hop. If you know them like I know them, they gon' tell you if your team, if they won or lost, and who the ball. So listen to Professor, yes sir, and pay attention, cause he gon' teach a lesson.
This is Dr. Cavil's Inside the HBCU Sports Lab. I'm here in Columbia, South Carolina, at the College Sports Research Institute, better known as CSRI. You may have recalled I was here last year doing a presentation with two doctoral students. That was Billy and Charles Bishop. In regards to, and that's Billy Rosenberg, I should say, as students in the program. Well, I'm back here doing some more research, fellowshipping, making sure I get my academic information out in the field, particularly studying HBCU athletic programs. And we have a bigger show today to really talk a little bit more about those HBCU athletic programs in various capacities. So let's get back into it. Today, welcome to episode 494 of Inside the HBCU Sports Lab radio show and podcast, the show that's covering the sporting HBCU diaspora, all things HBCU sports from institutions large and small. From the NAIA to the NCAA, we share insights and information on the HBCU sports culture, HBCU athletic aesthetics to facilitate the story of HBCU athletic programs and the business of HBCU sports. I'm your host, Dr. Kenyatta Cavil, along with Mike Washington and Charles Bishop. As you see, both Charles and Mike are out on assignment, but thankfully for the SportsWrap duo, that's Bryan and AD, the best duo in the business, many people will say. I'm not sure if I can argue with that. They are here to make sure that you get your Thursday evening HBCU Sports Labs, as we have been out on assignment, I guess, ourselves over the last 3 weeks. So I didn't want to delay, wanted to make sure we got it in there. So I made a deal with these individuals. And let me say this before we get started. The check's in the mail and all the thoughts and concerns that is going on in today's Inside the HBCU Sports Labs are not those responsible for the labs. These are individual thinkers that will share their perspective on all things HBCU sports. And if you allow them, much, much more, to be honest with you. Brilliant individuals. But with that being said, without further ado, we have Bryan Fulford and AD Drew. AD Drew, how you doing today?
I'm doing fine, Doc, considering you said we're the best duo. Are we the best duo or are we the best duo that you got in reserve? Don't answer that. Don't answer that. Just have to throw it out there.
Thank you for not making me answer that, because I didn't want to get the answer wrong. That being said, how you doing today?
I'm doing all right, Doc. I'm managing. My bracket is already looking messy, and my upset teams act like they don't want to be upset makers today. So I don't know. It's
too much analytics, man. Too much analytics, Bryan.
Too much. I should have just gone chalk and just thrown darts at a wall. I'd be much better off.
Well, obviously, there's some good news and tough news to report today since we've been on. We talked about the Howard game. Man, it went down to the wires. They fought back, credit to the Bison. And they had 3 opportunities, talking about the game yesterday with Grambling and Montana State going to overtime. You were that close with 3 opportunities as time was winding down for the Howard Bison to send that game in overtime. And as everybody knows by now, it did not happen. But a great game. With that being said, let's get in some of the news of the day and see which direction you want to go. I'm going to start with you, Bryan, to kind of catch everybody up and get your perspective on some of the HBCU news. I'm curious to see what direction you go in. And I think I know, but go ahead and let your hair hang.
Well, I'd be selfish if I didn't start with the historic win by the Grambling State Tigers last night in the first four. It bothers me. He's still hearing respected media people call it the play-in game. No, it's not a play-in game. It's the first four. Now for us old school folks who remember the 64, there might be some folks who remember when it was 32, or 48. But anyway,
56. Stopped at 56 along the way.
Did it really?
Yeah. For about a year or two, it stopped at 56 in the early 80s.
Wow.
Oh, see,
I
look at
remember
that.
the 32 and the 48.
Yeah, I don't remember the 50, whatever. But okay,
Yeah.
it doesn't
I think
surprise.
it was a 64 in 1984, if I remember correctly.
All right. Well, Grambling State took on a Montana State team, 16 versus 16, obviously. And I was very troubled by, this game in the first half. Grambling was a 4-point underdog. They were down by about 9 at half. But put together a great game. I think they trailed by as many as 14 in the second half, but managed to fight their way back to grab the lead. Game eventually ended up going into overtime, tied at 72, and then in overtime, the Grambling State shooting they outscored Montana State 16 to 9 in overtime to get the 88-81 win. Grambling went on a 23-6 run in the second half to grab that lead. It was kind of interesting because I think in the first half, Montana State shot something like 60% in the first half. And then Grambling turned around, and I knew that wasn't going to last. Usually it doesn't last. Say that. Grambling turned around and shot 50% in the contest, 40% from the three-point line, out-rebounded Montana State. Great game for Grambling State. Jim Crawford led the way, 19 points for Grambling State. Here's a guy, he averages, get this, 2.8 points a game on the season. That's crazy. So shout out to Jim Crawford. Just stepping up when he had to step up. So Grambling State improves to 21-14. They're going to take on Purdue, the number one seed. Who? Hey, look, let's keep it real. I'm an Indiana guy. I am not a Purdue fan, though. I'm an Indiana guy, and Purdue has lost the last 2 seasons to a 15 seed and a 16 seed. So if someone tells you Grambling doesn't have a shot, just laugh at them and just say, hey, the team they're playing has lost to a 15 and 16 the last year. It's worth a little pizza money, right? It's worth a little pizza money.
Except if it's going to bust your bracket like it would mine.
Well, I didn't pick.
That's
Purdue
when you're supposed to have 2 brackets, AD Drew.
Thank you. You're supposed to have 2 brackets. Yes.
I went with my primetime sheet, my sheet of integrity, whatever you want to call it. I only submitted one.
Yes, that's the first one.
I only submitted 1 bracket this year to everything because I just tried to I took my heart out of it. I took a lot of my head out of it because I went with a lot of analytics. So this is like the second or third year I've tried to go by the numbers instead of what I've seen. So we're going to see if the numbers back up what I see on my bracket.
Yeah. And I also saw that Vice President Harris also sent a message or made a phone call to Coach Jackson and Grambling. And how about the post game? I don't know if anybody has seen the video of Coach Jackson's post game where he talked about he's a guy who went to Central State. He talked about that experience of meeting his wife in Dayton and just so many close friends and family and the connections he has in that Ohio area. And I think he summed it up. I'm surmising here. He said something about he became a man in Dayton, met his wife in Dayton, and obviously probably one of his greatest moments to date as a collegiate coach was in Dayton. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, that was really cool. I'm glad you shared that part of the news as well, just the victory. But let me go to you, AD Drew, and get your thoughts on what some of the highlight news of the day. What direction are you going into?
I see your Grambling State, Bryan, and I want to raise you an ag school. This would be the one north of where we went to school at in Alabama. Alabama A&M Bulldogs picked up a win in the collegeinsider.com postseason basketball tournament, 81-71 over Austin P of the. They're not an OVC anymore, correct? They moved conferences. They used to be in the OVC there with Tennessee State. SWAC Rookie of the Year, Chad Moody posted a career high 24 going, Bryan, you love this, 11 of 13.
Hey, that's my kind of efficiency right there. I love that. Love that.
Adding 5 rebounds and 2 blocks. Omari Peak chipped in 18 and 7. And Cameron Tucker had a double-double with 11 and 13, along with 4 assists. So the first 6 minutes, Austin P led 15-9, and that was the large lead that they had. A&M came back with a 12-2 run over the next 3 minutes to retake the lead. Bulldogs grabbed the lead and held on to it from the remainder of the game. Went up. They was up 11 at the half, led by as many as 17 in the second half. Now, this is what we were hoping for. And I'm going to come back with a sidebar after I say this. Norfolk, Alabama A&M, SWAC, MEAC. Northeast, Southeast. It's everything that you want in an HBCU battle. And it's the first time, I believe this is the first time HBCUs have faced each other in this tournament, if I do have that correct.
Yeah, you might be right. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm trying to think about that first year. I think they were trying to set it up for the first game, but with some of the teams pulling out, deciding not to play, it ultimately did not happen. So I think you're right on it. We need to check on it.
And how many teams in this tournament do we know?
It was supposed to be like 16, but they couldn't.
But they went to 12.
So I think it's 15. So that's why Norfolk State actually got the bye.
Okay. So yeah, we 2 wins away from the well, we guaranteed to have at least one HBCU advance to the next round. Yeah. That's a good thing, which would be the semifinals then. If I've got the math correct.
Because this essentially is Elite 8 because the 16 they play. Right. Reduce, get you halfway. That's 8, which is Norfolk. They got to buy into the 8, so you go from 8 to 4. So it would be the last 4.
Yeah, so we guarantee to have a Final Four team that is an HBCU. But here's my sidebar. And I
know they're gonna find you for using 5 on 4 for the CIT if they find you.
Call it the
That's why I said the last 4 because you got
right.
The NAIA that has their own 4 term they use. Final Four has literally licensed the Final Four, so they beat you all over the head. You use their term.
Well, we're gonna have to send them their $2 for that one. No, but here's my question. And I was wondering this with Dr. McClellan in the room as the chair of the NCAA men's basketball committee. I was just curious, since we knew that Grambling and Howard were going to be first 4 teams. I wonder how much debate there was in that room for having those 2 meet up with each other in the first 4, which would have essentially been an HBCU national championship game within the midst of the NCAA Division I men's tournament. I really wonder how much conversation there may have been in that room for that.
That's a good point. And the thing about it, even with Dr. Charles McCullen, one thing you know is he wasn't in the room for it because
he could have been in the room not for the SWAC portion of it.
Well, that's what I'm saying. He can't be in the room if you're having a discussion about the two. It's going to always involve the SWAC to get in the thing, so he can't be in there in terms of that discussion part. But it's fascinating to see because the last time this happened was 2 years before COVID, when you had North Carolina Central winning the MEAC tournament facing off against Texas Southern University. That's when Coach Davis was leading the team at that time at Texas Southern University. So Texas Southern won that game, so it would have been fascinating because I was looking close to see that happen. I knew pretty much that Howard would get the first four, but I wasn't sure about Grambling. I thought they may have gotten a 16 outright in terms of winning the regular season. But it worked out in terms of that. Before we get to another big news that kind of ties in about Grambling winning and what does that mean for the SWAC financially. But before we do this, since you're talking about the Alabama A&M and Norfolk State matchup, and I was asking as they had TBA first for the CIT, I was hoping or pushing for, it probably is the better term, for Tennessee State with their overall record to see them face up against Norfolk State in that opening round, which would have been fascinating to see that happen. But didn't find the 16 teams, so obviously Norfolk State had the advantage and got the essentially what became a bye. And now you get the matchup. The reason I bring all that up, during non-conference play, you end up getting some HBCU matchups. For the SWAC, you had 6 of them. And as we got into conference play, I talked about the fact that the SWAC had 6 wins against HBCUs and 3 against the MEAC in terms of those 6 wins of their 9 total games they played against HBCU. MEAC had 5 wins against HBCU and 2 against the SWAC. So the SWAC will either come out of this 4 out of 6, 2/3, 67%, or they will be at 3-3, 50% in terms of their winning percentage against the MEAC. So it's fascinating to kind of put that touch on it about what that looks like. So I'm fascinated to see what the game will be on ESPN, and that is Saturday. But with that being said, the bigger news, or at least financially, is significant, is the fact that everybody is excited as I'm getting these texts. I follow this stuff, so I know, but I appreciate folks outside of those that are HBCU fans. As I said, they're not like us in regards to just being on it and reporting it all the time about the nearly $2 million that the SWAC conference will receive over 6 years, put out here by Steven Gaither, HBCUGameday. That Alabama A&M report that Drew did was from HBCU Sports. But what a way to make history. To get in the tournament, win your first game, you make sure that the SWAC gets their $2 million. And this is rolling over. This is the 3rd consecutive win by the SWAC. So they really are having significant revenues over this rolling period of time. It extends over 3 years, so it doesn't drop off if they didn't win 2 consecutive in terms of the 6 years that you get the payout. So this is big time money when you talk about it. As was said on here, Grambling won 88-81. It is also earns the SWAC roughly $2 million over the next 6 years. Pete Thamels, ESPN senior college football writer, explained it compactly via X, formerly known as Twitter, on Wednesday. The value of a unit for the men's NCAA tournament is nearly $341, $802, or $341,000, I should say, $802. Thamel tweeted on X. The value changes by year because it incrementally goes up every year based on that contract, just how contracts are rolled out. I've told a lot of folks about the payout. And so as the payout goes up from the contract that the NCAA signed, the payout for each institution over the year that earns a unit, and it incrementally goes up exponentially as if you have multiple teams in there and you have multiple teams win. But for this framework, the value changes by year, but that means a payout of nearly $2 million for the NEC and the SWAC over the next 6 years by Wagner and Grambling winning the first 4. So big time money, big time things going on there. Fascinating to see what that looks like. Remembering that was 2019, the first 4 when Texas Southern kind of got it done against North Carolina Central to give the money at a time. And at that time, it was like 1.5. So you can see how it continues to incrementally go up. Big time stuff. Before we get in there, I do want to get your thoughts on this before we take this break, Brian. What were your thoughts in terms of that money?
So I want to understand, because the school that's participating, do they get a share that's greater than the others, or how is that, or is it everybody every conference member gets a portion of that 341 every year?
First, let me say different conferences do it different ways. You have some conferences that provide a percentage, and a school will get a larger percentage just outright. Some conferences put it all in a pool, and then it's divvied up by a unit, and you might get an extra unit. And when I say that, you might get in terms of basically, if you think about this on a business, you get an extra dividend paid out to you. So that would be significant versus the dividend that you already get. So, for example, in the SWAC, previously, what they would do is you would get a share. And there's 12 teams in the conference, so every team would get a share. Then there was a share for the SWAC championship game. There was a share for a SWAC men's basketball tournament. And then there was a share for women's championship. So those are basically 3 shares. At one time, you would get a half share if you made it to the football championship game, but were not the winners, you still would get a half share. So everybody automatically gets 1 share, and then if you win those, you can add up to another share. So where does a share get important? Basically, you have your money that comes in, revenue comes in, minus the expenses of the conference that goes out, and you either have a profit or a loss. Right now, obviously, the conference is making money, so they have a profit, and you divide that up by the number of shares, 15 shares, 15 and a half shares, 16 shares, whatever shares they are based on how they break that up. And then everybody's going to get at least 1 share. Then possibly, in this case, you would get 2 shares. Well, they added a significant adaptation to that. And if a team wins in the tournament, after last year, I think it was maybe 2 years ago, that team that won, Texas Southern, they all voted with the president supporting it that they would get even a larger share. So they get almost a bonus part if they win. So if you stay there and you lose a game, everybody just gets their share. You get your extra share for winning the basketball championship, but that was it. But now that you did the double-double, as I kind of like to call it, and in Grambling's case, they did the triple-triple. They won the regular season, they won the tournament, and they won a game in the NCAA tournament. They do get a larger share to sum it up and ask your questions in terms of what that looks like. Off the air, I'll give you a little more in terms of how all that came to be. Sometimes people are working quietly behind the scenes to help get things done more than what we realize. But, yep, good stuff there.
And I hope the athletic departments are putting that money being into the program. You know,
I will say this. For Texas Southern, I know that's the case. Okay. For Grambling, speaking with that AD, Dr. Scott, who is trying to find a way to jump in the top 5. He was not one of the top 5 ADs I listened last year. But in terms of where they're going and what they've won on championships, I can assure you, unless the bottom falls out, he's going to be in the top 5 this year. The question is where he's going, and he's tracking. Is he going to be able to get to number 1? Ashley ended up being the number 1. My first inaugural year there, he's knocking on Ashley's door. And maybe he's going to pull him back. We'll see if Ashley can find a way to get some things done in the spring. Melody Webb over there at Norfolk State, she was in the top 5, the only woman in the top 5. She's running off in terms of what happened with Norfolk State. She's going to be in the mix, continue to be in the mix, but it's going to be interesting because if Dr. Travion Scott jumps in the top 5, that means somebody's got to fall out. Somebody's got to fall out.
Yeah.
So we'll see what that looks like in terms of that. So great point. I know those 2 programs in terms of investing money back in the program that generated the money. Those 2 ADs understand, and they have the support of the president, more importantly, to make sure that they're able to do that. And so that relationship and to be able to talk to your president and share the importance of getting it done is huge. And I give kudos for those ADs, VPs of athletics to get it, and it rises their ability to be in that top 5 fold. So we'll see what it looks like. I know some ADs look at that pretty seriously. Some not so much, but I'm fascinated to see what that looks like as we get to closing out this spring. We got a lot of stuff to go. Track and field, baseball, softball. We'll see what that looks like. All sports trophies mean a lot. So it's fascinating. With that being said, got into the first part of the show, half hour. We'll take our first break, kind of overdo it. We split with all that information. We kind of split 2 segments, but I like the way we did it. And for many of those that traditionally follow the show, yes, we are on an hour early. We got in here since I was on the road. I thought it was important to go ahead and get this done and get it out there. I got a couple of meetings I got to get to for the CSRI. With that being said, let's take our first break and come back on the other side and talk about some of these. We kind of dabbed on it, but we're going to get into more basketball tournament talk, see what people think. What are the women matchup, men's matchup, particularly going out there. We'll do a little bit on CBI and see what you're thinking about what's going to happen there. Bethune-Cookman is in the mix as well as their season continues. Texas Southern lost in the CIT opener, played 7 players in the mix, played pretty well there, but could not find a way to pull it out. Stick with us, be right back after this break.
If you think all pads are exactly the same, think again. This is Always Ultra Thins reinvented with the Always Triple Protection System. This pad wicks gushes 90% faster, absorbs even more so you can feel dry, and locks odors in. Rethink your pad for up to 100% leak-free and odor-free comfort with the totally reinvented Always Ultra Thins. This is always like never before.
The Cuvée Group is a Florida-based marketing and training consulting firm. We help businesses communicate to their target audience and engage them in conversation. We also help to expand their audiences, which will ultimately result in growth for those organizations. In addition to being a certified constant contact specialist, my colleagues and I are also certified in John Maxwell Leadership Principles. We use these proven principles to conduct workshops, training, and private coaching sessions for individuals and companies looking to take things to the next level. Contact us to schedule a free consultation. Issues today, don't delay, call Cuvée.
As technology continues to bring changes to the world of education, it's time we also reimagine teacher professional development. Gone are the days of one-size-fits-all learning that can only be accessed at a specific time and place. The Stride PD Center is an on-demand library of mobile-friendly courses that allow educators to learn anytime and anywhere. Our dynamic courses provide bite-sized learning and help educators advance their knowledge while also gaining professional development hours. The best professional development plans are those that include a level of flexibility and choice for educators. Whether you're a teacher, school, or district, visit us today to take charge of your learning.
Compress the analytic data with the hip hop. If you know them like I know them, they gon' tell you if your team, if they wanna lose, and who the ball. So listen to Professor, yes sir, and pay attention, cause he gon' teach a lesson.
This is Dr. Cavil with Inside the HBCU Sports Lab. Let's talk about some of the games that are coming up. Chivalry's not there. Let's start with the women. You have the NIT, women's NIT, with North Carolina A&T getting the bid over there in regards to having a solid season, 20 wins, 11 losses. They play in-state rival, if you would, North Carolina, Greensboro. So it'll be an interesting matchup. That's at Friday at 7 o'clock. So we'll see what that looks like. Let me give you a couple of other ones to see which direction you all want to go in terms of these tournament games. Obviously, on Friday, you have matchups of the NCAA tournament with Norfolk State as a 15 seed taking on Stanford. Stanford comes in with a record of 28-5. Norfolk State at the 15 seed comes in a record at 27-5, winning both the regular season and the tournament in terms of that matchup. Then on Saturday, a lot of people have been talking about this matchup, which is Jackson State with a 14 seed over number 3 UConn. UConn comes in at 29-5, 26-6 Jackson State. One of the things that stood out to me, and it didn't hit home until I heard it, On the women's side, we've seen some of these 12-5 upsets that you talk about on the men's side, right? Obviously, we finally got our first 16 over 1 seed a couple of years ago. And those that follow HBCUs know about the 15 seeds over the 2. We have 3 out of the MEAC alone that have got it done. Obviously, talked about the expansion of the tournament. You had Southern coming in with the 14 seed before they got to the 64 field when it was over Georgia Tech in terms of that matchup. So you've seen some of that. But on the women's side, they came out with the message talking about that a 16 seed, a 15 seed, or a 14 seed have never won on the women's side. And that kind of shocked me. And then I stood back and I'd be like, I guess that's right. But I thought there were some upsets, but not on the women's side. So, man, 15 Norfolk can get it done. You talking about getting into the record books of Jackson State, how close they were a couple of years ago with what looked like they were going to get it done against LSU, not to be had. But on the women's side of those things out there, Drew, which direction you want to go with either one of those games?
I'm going to go with if any team that's an HBCU is going to pull this upset, it's going to be Jackson State. Number one, Jackson State has the size. Number two, Jackson State has the athleticism. The question will be, can Jackson State shoot the ball effectively enough in order to beat a UConn? And one thing that Jackson State probably does as good as anybody on the Division I level is rebound. So can they rebound? Especially, well, they've got to do 2 things. Number one, they've got to limit UConn to 1 shot. And then number 2, they've got to create second chance opportunities by getting those offensive rebounds. But you've only won half the battle by getting the offensive rebound. You have to convert those offensive rebounds into points. And that has to be better than a 1-to-1 ratio. What I mean by a 1-to-1 ratio, if you get 10 offensive rebounds, you should at least get 10 points. It has to be, something like 8 offensive rebounds for 14 points. It has to be a ratio like that in order for them to compete. Can they defend the 3 from UConn? That's another question. So can they get it done? Yes, but I love my HBCUs. It's in the jingle, Doc, so I'm required to say that. I'll send you your $2. I'll send you your $2 on that too. But I love my HBCUs. That's $4, but I have to put my money on UConn, even though I love them.
I understand it, and I see that. Before I go to you, Brian, to see which game you're going to go with, it's fascinating when you think about it. In that first round, which certainly shouldn't surprise folks when they think about the fact that a 16, 14, 13 seed hadn't won on the women's side, unlike the men's where you play on neutral sites, which should give you a little bit more equal footing to some degree. And women's side, those whole sites are played on the campus of the higher seed out of that region. So here in South Carolina, obviously South Carolina, they're number 1. So in this host hotel for the conference, I'll have a final. That first round game will be here tomorrow. I might get a chance to see a little bit of South Carolina before I get on the road. But North Carolina Tar Heels, the women's program, are staying in this hotel. You also have the baseball SEC. You know how big it is, and we'll get a chance to sneak in some baseball talk. So I figure I threw this in there. And you have Vanderbilt taking on South Carolina. Guess what? They're here in the hotel as well. So fascinating when you see all this, and now I can understand why those rooms were going up in price for those staying over the weekend. Thankfully, I'm getting out of here, so I didn't get hit with those prices. But Ryan, with that being said, what direction do you go in regards to A&T and the NIT? Are you going back to the NCAA tournament? You got that 15 versus 2, Stanford and Norfolk State. Or are you going with Jackson State and UConn?
Oh,
Well,
hey, Brian, Doc know he shouldn't talk to a rattler about rooms when we had to go to Tallahassee for
oh
homecoming.
my
Anyway,
goodness, yeah.
go ahead, Brian.
Well, I think that let's not forget today there is a very important or interesting matchup happening today with Grambling State women. Grambling State's women playing Oral Roberts, I believe. It's at Oral Roberts in Tulsa. That's the women's NIT, and I believe that game is 8 Eastern, 7 Central. So coming up here, well, probably in about an hour and a half. And what's interesting, Grambling State was a team that probably was the second best team in the SWAC. And outside, I mean, they put on I think they had won like 10 or 11 games prior to losing to Alcorn. So I think this is, even though they're about a 9 to 10 point underdog tonight on the road, this is a team that's capable of winning. We've seen this. This is a good Grambling State team. So I think it'd be, I kind of laughed when I saw a friend on Twitter say, "Uh-oh, Grambling's a basketball school." I laughed, but I laughed hard. But I'll tell you what, if the Grambling women can get a win,
it's over.
I might have to eat a little crow on this one, Doc, and be like, Grambling. Yeah, Grambling
you
might
say
be
for real, they are.
They might be becoming a basketball school.
I got a bottle of hot sauce over here for you, Brian.
Yeah, look, that's only if they win. Will I be, eating crow if that happens?
Well, I'm glad you made sure you got in the Grambling stuff, so you do have both two teams, women's in regards to what that looks like in that tournament. So that's a good thing there. On the men's side, let's get in some of these matchups. Obviously, we kind of dove in this a little bit. We have the game on Saturday in the CIT, which will be Norfolk and Alabama A&M SWAC MEAC matchup. But you also have Bethune-Cookman out of the SWAC facing Arkansas State in the CBI. That's a single location game, so all the games are down in Daytona. So not a far travel, obviously, for Bethune-Cookman, almost like a semi-home game to some degree. Not in the confines of the boxes. I'm sure they would like to have it. You also have Delaware State out of the MEAC taking on Seattle. So that's fascinating when you talk about that. And I'm going to throw Chicago State a bone. I know they're not an HBCU, but they are a predominantly black institution in terms of the makeup of their student body. They take on UC San Diego. Fascinating to see the work they get there. Then no teams, obviously, in NIT, so I won't talk about that as well. But then you have, obviously, the NCAA tournament with Grambling getting a chance to move on to play against North Carolina. Sticking with you, Brian, what direction are you going on the men's side for the tournaments that continue to exist?
Can I jump off the NCAA?
Sure.
Because
you get to go.
Damn you, Brian. Damn you, Brian.
I got you, Drew. I got you. Well, look,
I gotta talk about it as well.
I gotta go with my guy. L's up. My guy, Coach Chris Wright and Langston, taking on their what do they call it? The round of 16. They're in Kansas City. So, they got 4 games to win a national title, 3 games to get to the title game. They play LSU Shreveport tomorrow, Friday, at 2 Eastern, 1 Central. And this is a team that they got knocked out in this round last year. And I think this team, this is a different team. This team, that experience, not only for the coach, but for the few returners, and the fact that they got a young man, I believe Anthony, was it Anthony Roy? I hate that I can't even remember the young man's name right off the bat. But watching him, I've watched the game. I've read some interesting
Anthony
articles.
Roy.
Okay,
Anthony
I'm
Roy.
glad I got it right. Okay, he's a player that Coach Wright got from a Division I program, has benefited tremendously from being in the Langston University environment and culture and playing for Coach Wright. And, you talk about guys who have kind of found themselves and got themselves in a better place. He's in a better place, and he may go on back to the Division I level next year. But he's a special dude, and I'm rooting hard for Langston. I want to see Coach Wright get that national title. So it starts tomorrow for the Langston Lions. So that's where my mind and focus is. No, with all respect to our brothers and sisters in Division I.
A lot of reason to give that. I like the way you went off the path because I have my eyes on Langston too, to see if they can find a way to cut down the nets at the NIA level. Drew, what direction you gonna go? You gonna continue with the NIA? I know you had that on the tip of your tongue, and Brian beat you to it. My fault because I called him first. But going to you, AD Drew, which direction you go based on that being said?
No, I want to stay with that Langston game, sure. And no disrespect to our other men's HBCUs that are playing, but I really want to get behind a team that has a chance to bring home the hardware. And the path forward for Langston to bring home the hardware is easier than everybody else's. They play an LSU Shreveport team who they have defeated in each of the last two times that they met each other in 2018, which nobody was there, including the coach. But they did defeat them last year. When I say last calendar year, this season, they defeated them 71-59 right before Christmas on the 19th of December. So we have some recent history that we can go by. And just kind of throw some numbers out there to you. Langston is averaging 82 points per game while giving up 58 points per game. LSU Shreveport is averaging 84.7 per game. But here's the number, y'all, that y'all need to look at. They are giving up 78.7 points per game. So when you look at that point differential, you're only talking about a 6-point margin. Mm-hmm. You're giving up 78 points a game, and you got a team like Langston that scores 82 points a game.
Not good.
You see where I'm going with that, Brian. I expect Langston to move on. And by the time we come back on the air, Dr. Cavil, Langston should be getting ready for, I guess, the semifinals, I believe, would be played. Maybe the finals on that night. Tuesday night, I believe, would be the final. I think that might be the final. It's either Tuesday or Wednesday night would be the final. Yeah. So, we may be having a watch party on inside the HBCU Sports Lab. So I'm going to go ahead and get my popcorn and adult beverage ready for it.
Let's do it. With that being said, let's take our second break, get on the other side, and we're going to switch it up a little bit. We're going to talk a little bit baseball. As things kicked off this weekend, as everybody was focused on the tournaments, championship tournaments, which certainly was the right place to be, conference play jumped off in the SWAC. And want to get your thoughts on what took place there and maybe some framework of some of the matchups this weekend. So we'll be right back after this break.
Since 2002, Empowerment Resources, Inc., a nonprofit organization, has empowered more than 1,500 youth and adults in Duval and surrounding counties through its programs Journey into Womanhood, Girls Mentoring, Life Skills for Teens, and parenting education coaching. To get involved with programs, volunteer, or donate, visit www.empowermentresourcesinc.org. Follow us on social media, facebook.com/empowerment.resources and instagram.com/empowermentjax.
The human voice has always connected audiences with experiences. Major brands all across America have trusted Kever's voice time and time again. Conversational, powerhouse, intelligent, and sincere. That's the voice you need for your creative marketing process. KEAVERSVOICE.com. Kever's Voice, Kever's Voice, KeversVoice.com. Always on, all the time.
Nope. Nope.
Come on, him?
Ooh, I like him.
Quick, the quicker picker-upper. Bounty picks up messes quicker, and each sheet is 2 times more absorbent, so you can use less.
He's an 8.
He's a 9.
Bounty, the quicker picker-upper.
From novice to aficionado, find yourself here. High quality cigars plus personal customer service. Slow Burn is Waco's only mobile cigar lounge, featuring a meticulous, curated collection of premium cigars. Visit our website, www.slowburnwaco.com. That's www.slowburnwaco.com.
Compress the analytic data with your hip hop. If you know them like I know them, they gon' tell you if your team, if they wanna lose, and who the ball. So listen to Professor, yes sir, and pay attention, cause he gon' teach a lesson.
Let's get back into it in regards to some baseball. Hopefully y'all been at least keeping an eye on the baseball side, but I know y'all media side of it, so you're going to do just that. But with that being said, you have Black College 9 top 10 polls that comes out. They do it for what they call the large schools and the small schools. Obviously, we call it mid-major and major division over here on this side. But let's get in a little bit of SWAC and give you some updates. Last time I had the poll released March 3rd, they had the top 3 were Albany State, Florida Memorial, and Savannah State, just to get some indication there. I think AD Drew will share some information on the mid-major side, one team to keep your eyes on particularly. And then on the major division side, large schools, as they say, top 3 were Alabama State at 3, number 2 Jackson State, and number 1 North Carolina A&T. I wanted to put that off because you had that 2-3 matchup against Alabama State and Jackson State this past weekend when you look at those games. But let's start here on Friday. You had rain out, so games were pushed to Saturday. Instead of your traditional Friday, Saturday, Sunday, you had some double headers on Saturday. But let me start with Friday, where you had Grambling facing Alcorn State. Grambling got it done 10-0 in that matchup. On Saturday, you had Prairie View facing Pine Bluff in terms of that matchup, which was fascinating because Prairie View ended up sweeping the series over Pine Bluff. But in terms of the first game, they won 16-5. So Prairie View brought out the bats in terms of that. And then the second game, in terms of that nightcap, Prairie View won 8-2 on Saturday. Grambling also defeated Alcorn for the second game of that matchup, 12-3, as Grambling defeated Alcorn, getting it done there. Texas Southern had the matchup against Southern. They win that game 8-7. That was pushed to Saturday. You have Bethune-Cookman getting it done against Mississippi Valley, 11-2. You have Alabama, FAMU and Alabama A&M mixed it up. FAMU won 11-1 over Alabama A&M in terms of getting it done there. FAMU played 2 on Saturday, and FAMU defeated Alabama A&M in the second matchup 13-7. As Bethune-Cookman played 2 as well, defeating Mississippi Valley 10-5 in that second game matchup. But the one that kind of had folks pausing was Jackson State defeating Alabama State in game 1, 14-10. There were 2 games played that day. And guess what? Jackson State was not finished with after game 1. They got it. Alabama State Hornets again. That was on the road in Montgomery. They defeat Alabama State 4-2 for Jackson State getting 2 of those games. And then on Sunday, to kind of close things up, give you some updates there. FAMU sweeps Alabama A&M, bringing out the brooms, 15-5. Prairie View sweeps Arkansas Pine Bluff, 15-5 also. You had a rain out of the Grambling Alcorn game, postponement of the Bethune-Cookman Mississippi Valley game, and 2 games were canceled between Texas Southern and Southern. You also had the third game between Jackson State and Alabama State canceled as well. So a lot of rain this first weekend with some cancellations. Be interesting to see how we follow. Will they be able to get these games in and how they might affect the standings going forward. I started with you, Bryan, so I'm going to give some love to AD to make sure that he gets to get his information in first on this segment. Go ahead, AD.
You know something, Doc? A couple of observations as you were scrolling through those scores. I know football is king. Spring football is here. Are you sure you were reading baseball scores with some of those scores, or were those spring football scores? Because you got a lot of double-digit games out there, especially when at Friday. Friday you tend to have both teams in single digits, but when you get to Saturday, especially on Sunday, our pitching just has not held up thus far for our HBCUs for a 3-game series. That's number one. Number two, you mentioned the weather, Dr. Cavil. I don't know about where you live at, but I know here in South Georgia, I believe it's like rain every weekend since the calendar has turned 2024. We've had significant rain every weekend where I work at. We had to move series up, back, around, sideways, and everything else in order to try to get these games in. And you bring that up, we know last year it affected the seeding at the end of the season, and especially the last week or so of April into May, where people were trying to play on a Tuesday and Wednesday, or play a doubleheader on a Tuesday, or since we got rained out at my place, we're going to play the makeup game at your place, but I'm going to be the home team, getting all kind of creative things, trying to get those games in. And the reason I say that is, what's the one thing that we have seen that has been lacking thus far is the pitching. So when you try to squeeze in those extra games, they get you off your rotation, especially in games that count for so much, especially on that east side, Dr. Cavil. Oh my God. You've got, what was the preseason standings, and
Arizona State was picked to do it again.
And where are they at right now?
They're not at the top, starting off 0-2 in conference play.
All right, what
in the hole?
FAMU, we talk about FAMU with not doing anything out of conference, but what they do now is Alabama A&M, granted, but a W is a W. And when it comes to the end of May, they don't care if you beat Alabama State or you beat Alabama A&M. It's going to put you in a preferable seed. Or if you lose it, it's going to put you in a bad seed. So those are just my feelings on the SWAC. I'm gonna give it to Bryan so he can talk about the SWAC, but I do want to bring up our other NCAA conference that plays baseball after Bryan gives his comments on the SWAC.
Sure.
I think it's always good to see. I know, speaking for FAMU, it's always good to go to Alabama. It's always good to go to Huntsville. We can always count on the Bulldogs for their great hospitality in terms of serving up some W's, including on the softball side of things as well. So that was interesting. I tell you, Doc, I always kind of look at these midweek games as well. And as I'm kind of going through the scores from the midweek, the score that kind of stands out, watching Texas A&M and Prairie View yesterday. Texas A&M only won 11-9. So
Prairie View was up in the fourth inning in that matchup because it got a lot of people talking in the Prairie View blogs about how close they got to knocking off the Aggies. So great point.
Yeah, I know Florida A&M traveled to South Florida, USF. They were up 3-0, ended up losing 9-6. So it's good seeing that there's some competitive baseball being played against these programs, because I cannot stand seeing these 32-1 games, which kind of look like, I don't know what to call them. I don't even have a cute joke to I can't even be petty when you just see somebody getting beat 25-7 or 32-1. No school names being thrown out, but if you know, you know. So I mean that's kind of that's rough. That's rough. So this weekend, my eyes are in Daytona Beach. A matchup between the Rattlers and Bethune-Cookman, two of the best in the East. Of course, the Rattlers, the defending SWAC champs and defending East champs, and so we're traveling down to Daytona Beach, looking to skin some cats.
Good stuff. It'll be fascinating to see what that looks like. AD Drew, I know you wanted to get back and talk some baseball at the Division II level, mid-major level, as we like to say.
Yeah, Albany State Golden Rams. Let's watch out for a very important series that they won this past weekend. They defeated Spring Hill. Not only did they defeat Spring Hill, they swept Spring Hill. And if you know anything about SIAC baseball, Spring Hill has been a thorn in the side of the Golden Rams for the last 3-4 years, pretty much under the Scott Hemmings tenure there at Albany State. And Albany State, they're 13-2 in conference right now. So the probably the most competitive. Let me look back at this. The one thing is they do not have. Yeah, they do. They've got a big series, and it's a month away with Savannah State to end the season, who trails them in the conference right now at 11-4. They've already played Miles and defeated Miles, who's the number 4 team. By the way, Spring Hill is number 3 in the conference. They have the season series 2-1 against Miles. Everybody else is there. Has Albany State picked up enough pitching to get over the hump? They've done so well the last 3-4 years in the regular season, but they've run out of gas come May. Hopefully this year, Albany State can stay out that losers bracket because they wind up having to come out. They've come out the losers bracket, and then number 2, that they have enough pitching, because the one thing that they turned around, they went through a rut there at the end of February, 1st of March, where they lost like 4 out of 6. But since then, they've turned it around. They're 16-7 overall. But just to put that in perspective, Doctor, 16-7 overall, they're 9-1 in the last 10, which tells you that it took them the first month of the season to figure out what the heck was going on. So let's keep an eye on the Albany State Golden Rams and see if they can do something, make it to the Division II tournament as the SIAC representative this year.
Good one. Way to go off the board. Good matchup. Last thing for you, Brian, before we take this last break and come back with the question of the day. AD had a question that he wanted to get out there. He wanted to partake in the question today, so we're going to give a chance to do that. But as we move forward to this weekend, we have some of the rivalry games taking place. You have Mississippi Valley traveling to Jackson that got off on a hot streak. And so that's a 1:00 game. You have the Texas series with Texas Southern traveling to Prairie View. Prairie View swept Pine Bluff, as we said. Texas Southern got one against N that they won against Southern. So both teams come in undefeated. You have Arkansas Pine Bluff going to Grambling, and this one would be under the lights. It's a 7:00 at Prairie View. Texas Southern is a 4:00 on Friday. Then you have Alabama State hosting Alabama A&M. That's also under the lights at 7:00. You have FAMU traveling to Daytona Beach. You talked about having some Wildcat meet. That is under the lights at 7:00. And then you have Southern traveling to Alcorn State, which is also under the lights at 7:00. So those are your matchups. Those series are Friday, Saturday, Sunday games. So some big matchup rivalry games. You got 4 of them on the docket with the Mississippi, Alabama, Florida, as well as Texas going up for 3-game series. We'll see if they can get them all in, but they look to start on Friday. Be interesting to see. Obviously, you talked a little bit about being excited about the Florida. So outside of that, what's the next game that you have your eyes on, Brian, this weekend?
I'm actually kind of curious, more so moving over. I could stay on the SWAC, but I was kind of keeping my eyes over on the on what Florida Memorial is doing over there. They just this past weekend won 3 out of 4 against the 12th ranked team in the nation, Kaiser University, who happens to be in the same conference, the Sun Conference. So that's a big win, and now they take on Ave Maria. And so, I know Savannah State is, I was just looking at the Black College Nines polls. I know Savannah State, I believe, is still ranked number 1 right now.
Which I don't understand how.
Oh, yeah, no. I guess that was an older poll. So
yeah, they the first part of the season when the Black College Nines drop they poll, they don't do week to week. They do like every 2 weeks or something like that and put it out.
Okay.
So you don't get until about mid-season where they start to do week to week polls. So that's what happens there. You have them team playing hot, and then they might hit the skids, but they hadn't released the updated poll. So
gotcha. Okay.
By both of y'all asking what's going on there.
So your Albany State won Florida. So they're ranked number 2 right now, 14-6 record, and I think they're in a conference that eventually this is a team that's going to be playing well. I was just looking at. I had it pulled up in terms of who they play. I just said Ave Maria, so that's who they have this weekend. Always interesting to see how teams respond after you have a big series like that. Can you equal their performance? Because a lot of times, sometimes you have a lot of success against a national ranked team, and then maybe you kind of lose focus or you lose yourself for the next game. So it's always hard after those games. So I think there's some good baseball down there at the Division II and NAIA level that definitely is worth paying attention to.
I do have an update before we take this last break as a promise and let you come in there. To your point, looked at Black College Nines. They did release their updated poll rankings, which came out yesterday, which has Savannah State at 3, Florida Memorial that you just talked about at 2, and 80 Drew, team you said watch. They're at
Albany State.
Albany State at number 1, to your point. In terms on the men's side, number 3, just to give you these I'm going to give you top 5 over there. FAMU at 5, Prairie View at 4. That's FAMU at 8 and 12. Obviously getting some big wins this weekend. Prairie View at 11 and 10 at 4 at number 3. Bethune-Cookman at 9 and 9. At number 2, Jackson State 15 and 4. And North Carolina A&T 14 and 5 have started off the year pretty well in regards to that. And these are some intriguing matchups. Prairie View had won those 2 classics, obviously, the Cactus Jack Classic where they played some of those teams in there, getting it done, sweeping that series. They came back with the MLB and won that series there where they got a game against A&T. So one of those 5 losses for A&T comes against Prairie View in the top 5. So these top 5 programs, Prairie View getting it done over Southern, getting in Texas Southern those matchups. But you look at these top 5 programs, they're playing some good baseball. So it'll be interesting to keep up what's looking out. You get to number 7 before you get a MEAC team, which now plays obviously in the Northeastern Conference, Norfolk State at 7-11. So playing pretty good baseball. Start out the season, just to give you some updates there. So I'm fascinating. Alabama State, Mississippi Valley, Grambling, Texas Southern round out the top 10, just so you know. So you can go check that out on Black College Nines. Brian, go ahead.
If you and also you mentioned Jackson State being number 2, North Carolina A&T number 1. Also from Black College Nines, both of those 2 programs are receiving votes in the latest National Collegiate Baseball Writers Association poll, top 25 poll. So, and when you look at that top 25, it's littered with SEC, ACC. Every now and then there's a sprinkled team I think the whole SEC is in this thing. I mean, honestly, I think there's only how many teams are in the SEC now? Is it 16?
16.
No, they still 14. They start
Is it still
16 next year.
14?
So
I
Texas,
swear,
Yeah.
I
you
swear.
might
all
be thinking
14
Texas is in there, but they still in the Big 12. But that was in
And what, 12 of them in the poll, right, Ryan?
I swear, I
Oklahoma,
didn't do
yeah.
an official count, but all 12. It just looks like a lot of SEC.
It's a lot of them. You can put it that way. It's a lot of them.
I'd say at least 10. At least 10 are in the top 25. So, and
What's
then
going
there's
to be interesting with the Pac-12, not to get too far off into that, but Pac-12, as it closes in terms of what we knew it to be, probably having some of their best seasons, obviously in terms of football. We saw what that looks like. Basketball, particularly on the women's side, they really are doing it. And so don't be surprised if they show off in baseball as they close off their chapter. Certainly in softball, you can imagine they're going to be in the mix. So you're right. In a lot of ways, that is a different mix when you think about taking that next step when you're basically going to close your doors. I know Pac-12 is looking to re-image and remake themselves with Washington State and Oregon State, but it won't be the Pac-12 we know, even if it does exist. Stick with us. Enough of that. We're going to go back to HBCU Talk with the question of the day from AD Drew right after this break.
We're back. It's time for the 2024 Urban NerdCon. Join us in Atlanta, Georgia, April 26th through the 28th at the Cortland Grand Hotel. Special guests include Underworld creator Kevin Grievous, Gary Gray from Fairly Odd Parents, from Nickelodeon, Giovanni Samuels, the Science Machine Michael Green, the Sci-Fi Sisters, and from Spaceballs and Star Trek Voyager, Tim Russ.
Hi, I'm Tim Russ. Join me April 26th through the 28th at the Cortland Grand Hotel in Atlanta, Georgia for the Urban NerdCon. Our heroes, our villains, our stories, everyone con. I'll see you there. Live long and prosper.
Visit theurbannerdcon.net to get your buy one, get one free badges before the price increases. Remember, our heroes, our villains, our stories, everyone's con. See you there.
Compress the analytic data with your hip hop. If you know them like I know them, they gon' tell you if your team, if they wanna lose, and who the ball. So listen to Professor, yes sir, and pay attention, cause he gon' teach a lesson.
This is Dr. Bill with Inside the HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Washington and Charles Bishop, both on assignment. Charles is one of his favorite segments. A lot of the listeners have talked about it as well. Shout out for all the lab listeners following us on all the social media platforms. Thanks for joining us today. AD Drew, what is your question of the day?
I'm gonna do a comment, then I'm gonna get to my question. You know, you just talked about the Pac-12, Dr. Cavil. I wonder what's gonna happen to those men's volleyball teams that come out the old Pac-12, because they have dominated men's and women's volleyball over the years. You know, your Stanfords, your UCLA's, and SC's, right, and Cal's. That was just a total sidebar. But my question of the day to you, and shout out to Charles Bishop. Hope I can do you honor with this question, Charles. May not be as thoughtful as the one you may give, but it's what's on my mind. And we posted this in our group chat, and we had some mild discussions about it in our group chat. There were a couple of articles that came out this week about the NCAA basketball tournament. And two things came out. One, the talk of getting rid of the automatic bid process for the mid-major and the low-major schools, where your conference tournament champion. So what kind of like what the NIT has done and what football is trying to do, they just want to take the quote-unquote best of the best, which we all know as the Power 2 plus the other power conferences. That's number one. And option two that we saw in an article was the expansion of the tournament to include more teams. We've seen 72 where all the 16s would play in a first four match. And I've seen anything from 72 to up in the 90s, 90, 92, 94, some number like that, where it equates out where you've got a bunch of, for lack of a better word, Brian, going old school, playing games to get you down to the 64 and then going with the 64, which we know would create a possibly scheduling nightmare where we now may be playing the championship game around tax day if they do a system like that. So just throwing that out. But Dr. Cavil, I would like to get your thoughts on some of these proposed changes that they are proposing to make to the NCAA tournament, and not just your opinion on it, because we all have our opinion, but kind of the business side of it, especially if you can kind of get into what this may mean financially for our schools and our conference if they, in option A, potentially shut us out, and then option B, if they expand it.
I'm glad you asked this question. I've heard that chatter out there as well. And let me first give the framework that I don't believe it's really the goal that they want. I think it is to expand the teams, which gets a little more into the financial side of your question. But obviously, we started out the show and talked about the financial windfall for the SWAC that they've had over the last couple of years of upwards of $2 million over the next 6 years, which is a continuation of them getting multiple units because of the first 4 wins they had by Texas Southern over the past 2 years, which is quite significant. So essentially, if they do go away with the automatic bid, those one bid leagues, for the most part, would not participate in the tournament, which means they would not get that unit. So you would be taking all that money away from them. I'm not sure how they would try to find a way to appease and provide some type of funding. And so that's why I do not think that's real, because you go from, $1.5 million, winning a game, $2 million, as you talk about the SWAC over a period of time, where now you're essentially getting zero. And in terms of the NCAA, where the money is in basketball. What I see this is a framework, and you kind of talked about this off the air, when a lot of ways it's copying what you see taking place in the CFP, where you see what I refer to as the Super 2, SEC and the Big 12, the Big 10 for all those that haven't been paying attention. And I see the next one as still the Power 2. I don't no longer call them the Power 4, which used to be the Power 5. And you have the G5, obviously. But I call it the Super 2, the Power 2, and the G5, which may become the G6 if Pac-12 rebuilds itself. You might find one of the conferences dying out from the trickle-down effect. But there's so much money in these conferences. As we've kind of seen, as I think people are starting to understand that the MEAC won't die and these FCS conference won't die, they'll just find a way to bring in some Division II programs or bring in some FCS programs up if you're looking at from football program, and even find a way to stay afloat and operate. There's just too much money for folks to lose that framework. But what I see this is them finding a way to get more revenue share. So you think about this. Let's say a Hassel and say 96 doesn't really appease them, but they go to the 72 model. That is essentially 8 more teams, which means that you could do in this, if you do it like this, you don't have to worry about playing in the tax season, to your point, where you really play everything now. So you either play maybe 4 games in Daytona, or you spread it around the country in various regions, and you add 8 teams, which essentially, instead of having essentially 16 seeds, right? The 2 that play in the 4, I should say, they play in the first 4, and the 2 that are already there. You push them out, and now you end up having 4 games that incorporate 16 seeds. What that does, though, people may not think about it, it pushes everybody up. Now those teams where we're looking at getting the 15 seeds, they actually will now all become what? 16 seeds. So your 14 seeds become what? 15 seeds. Your 13 seeds become what? 14 seeds. Those 12 seeds become 13. You get the point. It shifts all the way up. While all of a sudden you get to these 11 seeds where you have the multiple games playing. Now you add additional 11 seeds in there, if you would, that were pushed up from 10 seeds. And now you have all this extra room for essentially 4 more of the Super 2, Power 2, Big East, if you want to include them in that mix, and from a basketball Big West. Now they get a chance to squeeze them into these Super 2 leagues to get more teams in. So essentially they would end up getting 4 more teams in, 6 more teams in, which means what? Those units that you were talking about stacking up, now instead of doubling down and getting multiple units for coming into the tournament, now you get what? 4 more of those units, 6 more of those units, and those teams, a couple of those teams are going to win some games. So now you got the exponential multiplier effect. So instead of having now 18, 20, 22 units, now you're going to have 26, 28 units. And each of those units are valued at different money. So, yeah, it'll be separated and spread out more, but essentially these power brands, if you allow me to use that, will find a way just to collect more money. So instead of having, 96% of all revenue associated with the basketball, it'll go up to 98%. They're going to squeeze some more blood to make sure that they get more money at the end of the day. And those essentially the overall framework, if you take it from that, you get a better understanding of what they're doing, to your point, AD Drew. And so you start way up there where you get people that kind of go off the grid and be like, oh. And so now you come back and it's easier for them to palate to say, well, we'll work with you, meet you halfway, and we'll just expand to 8. And they still get what they really wanted from the first part, which is to get a larger percentage of the pie. To me, that's what these folks do. They continue to do. And keep your eyes on it. That's how they're getting more and squeezing more of the revenue and getting more control. And they want to do this ultimately because there's going to be some eventual way where you still have Division I in football, but they'll start being able to play these players, and they want to have more money to do that, which is really going to separate the classifications. Even though everybody will be Division I, you'll see the difference between that. And don't be surprised, since we're talking about baseball, don't be surprised if that becomes the part where they even give out more scholarships for baseball versus the 11.7 you see now, which is going to make that even more tougher to be competitive. So not to scare everybody, but that's what they do in terms of the inflection point and how they further separate and divide themselves to put themselves out there. So with that, let's call it a close. I got to get out here and get to this meeting. Thank you all for joining and making the show happen today. Well on time, but thank you for listening to Inside the HBCU Sports Lab. Make sure you share our podcast with your friends and colleagues. I am Dr. Kenyatta Cavil, the Dean of HBCU Sports, coming from inside the lab in the College of HBCU Sports with Mike Watts, Charles Bishop, that were out today. So we had none other than Bryan and AD, professors all in the building. We hope you enjoyed. Again, we want to thank you for listening to Dr. Cavill's Inside the HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Watts and Charles Bishop, AD Drew, Bryan Fulford, every Tuesday and Thursday at 6 o'clock. We look forward to next week as we discuss the latest news in the lab. We'll get to see if Langston has pushed forward and if we got any major upsets to talk about as well. See what that looks like for the CBI, CIT, give you some updates there. We'll see who's crowned HBCU in terms of the MEAC SWAC. Does it become 500 or does SWAC take another step in terms of showing that they may be becoming the basketball conference, much like we talk about between the SIAC and CIAA, where MEAC has kind of become the football conference until FAMU saved the day, I guess, this year. Maybe we'll see that it's coming on the basketball side as well. Did I just say that? I have them on here, so I'm going to be nice to them. Follow me, Dr. Kenyatta Cavil, DrKenyatta Cavil, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, Inside the HBCU Sports Lab 1 on X, formerly known as Twitter, as Facebook and YouTube, Inside the HBCU Sports Lab. Dream big, continue to move forward. We will talk with you soon. AD?
Y'all don't get caught up watching Hulu tonight. Y'all know what I'm talking about. Of course.
Bryan?
Lecture.
Dismiss.
I'm like, what is AD talking? Now I got to run to Hulu now.